And I'm already there.
Oh, just
Tamara?
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize.
Sorry,
We've literally have said no. It's my problem.
Just call me George.
George. I'm here with Kevin. I'm here with Tamara Kowalska from.
It's actually Kowalska.
Kowalska. For fuck's sakes! I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. We are here at the Initiative in Glengarry. We'll explain more about the facility as we get into this interview. We're here with Tamara Kowalska, who is newly appointed. Your title's a little strange, but you're kind of helping run this facility, right?
My role here is to help support residents, engage with local residents, and develop community resources for them.
You took over previously. Leo Gill was a guest on the show, and you took over his position here.
Yes,
correct?
I did.
So for those of you who might be interested or familiar with Leo, you're the new Leo. And as much as I love Leo, I'm glad that we have a new one.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fun being the new Leo.
That's awesome. So we are here because, as I said in my previous interview with George, you reached out to George Mannery, and we're talking about an event that you guys have coming up here February 1st to kind of show off the space. Mm-hmm. And this interview and that are sort of a way for us to kind of let people know that this is coming up February 1st, correct?
That's right.
Awesome. Maybe before we get into the interview proper, why don't you give the folks at home the details about that event, and then we'll just kind of get into what we will have to talk about. Okay?
Sure. Well, a little more than a year ago, as a result of a partnership that emerged between the Wyandotte Town Centre BIA and the Initiative Glengarry Renewal project, we have this beautiful storefront, and it's actually quite large, and space in itself is a resource. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to use this space as efficiently as possible and do as much with it as we can, especially for local businesses and residents. So that means we want this place to see a lot of traffic, a lot of people coming and going. We want there to be activity, interesting things going on, and we have tons of wall space, and it was just sort of screaming out for, local art to be displayed. And so February 1st, we are launching an art gallery space in this space. That's awesome. So that's what's so exciting. So we're hoping to have several artists per month, anywhere really between 3 and probably 10, depending on what they'd like to display, per month, show their work. It can be for sale, and then they would essentially receive all of the profits from that, so that we would be offering this as a kind of donation to them, but then also being able to invite the neighborhood in to see what people are doing, what wonderful creative things people are doing.
That's awesome. I know just from the conversations I've had about you rather than with you, you're very, very connected to the community and have been for most of your life. So this is kind of like just another extension of the work you've been doing almost your whole life, right?
Yeah, like unintentionally I've been connected. I first came to Windsor in 2000. Okay. And ended up sort of meeting wonderful people like George Mannery, and spending a lot of time just being downtown, and there were so many amazing things happening, and I just kept meeting people who were interested in creating and doing, and so that's what kept me in Windsor. Okay.
Give me a little of your prehistory. Tell me about the house you grew up in, mom and dad, siblings, that kind of thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm from Toronto, and I have a younger brother who is 4 years younger than me. He's married, he has 2 kids, he lives in Florida. When I was 12, my parents moved to the States, and I lived there till I was about 21.
What part?
All along the East Coast.
Oh, okay.
Sort of North Carolina, New York. I went to school in Boston, and then when I graduated university, I came back to Canada, and they all stayed.
Okay. What did mom and dad do that had you traveling so much, or had them traveling?
They just wanted to live in the States.
Okay.
Yeah, my mom is now an American citizen, and she always wanted to be American.
That's just that simple. It wasn't
Just that simple. I think so.
Okay.
I don't know. Like things were pretty. What's the word? Like very disruptive in my household. There wasn't a lot of.
not a lot of consistency.
Not a lot of consistency. Not a lot of peace. Not a lot of quiet. Just like, So. Yeah. But anyway, so I went to Boston University.
Okay.
For teaching, and then I came back to Canada kind of on my own, and my other extended family was here, grandmothers, and that's who I was closest to anyway.
How did teaching become a thing you were interested in?
I had a roommate in university, and after second year I was forced to choose some sort of track, and she was in education, and she said, why don't you just do this? And I was like, oh, I was gonna do the acting program, I was gonna be a French major. I didn't know what I wanted to do.
So like you came up in an environment that was sort of chaotic, and you kind of kept that for a while.
In a way, I'm pretty flighty and I like change, but I also I like creating a home environment, I guess, wherever I am. So I don't know.
Makes sense. And if I'm asking about stuff you're not comfortable talking about, let me know that for sure.
Yes.
But I'm very interested because you talk about sort of there was the chaos, that things weren't sort of grounded. I'm very sort of interested in that experience for you.
Really?
Yeah, very much so.
Oh. Well, I'm an Aquarius, which is an air sign, so we typically tend to, sort of not necessarily respect the fact that there may be boundaries and limits, right? We just go. Okay. On the other hand, I think everybody needs a place where they feel safe and comfortable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Did you have that growing up?
No.
You had no.
I mean, that's not fair to say.
Okay.
I always had a place to live. I always had food. My parents made sure that I went to school, and I went to good schools. So, and I know a lot of young people now, having worked at the Windsor Youth Center with homeless youth for so long, I know a lot of people who have not had that or don't have that. So I really appreciate the fact that probably in the face of a lot of adversity, my parents were able to provide that for me. I'm understanding what a difficult task that is for any parent. 100%, and I am so grateful. And I think that they really, really tried. However, emotionally there was so much disruption, so much like aggression and anger always in the house that I didn't feel comfortable with. It doesn't it's not comfortable for me to be in that kind of environment.
Are you an angry person?
I'm always, there's a little bit of anger that is always burning inside me. And it mostly has to do with all of the injustices that I see and am aware of, and that I don't know what to do about, and that I feel like my hands are tied a lot of the time, right? So yes, I have anger about things, but I don't feel like an angry person.
Okay.
I
guess what I'm kind of asking is the way you phrased it. I'm not entirely sure, and it may be because you either haven't decided or have decided that it's both. I'm not entirely sure if you look at it as like the lack of structure. Do you look at it as wholly negative, or do you look at it as a positive experience, or are you just kind of... Because the way you phrased it was sort of ambiguous. That's why.
Yeah, sorry, it is. And you know what? It's funny because I think, so this is what happens. What I've started to understand is that really, we are just these masses of contradictions. So where on the one hand, growing up, there was no structure because there was nothing emotionally that I could count on. Okay. In my family, the mood could change in a second, and you never knew what you were going to get. Okay. Walking in the door, never knew what you were going to get. And so I was always waiting for whatever.
Okay.
You know, like never comfortable or relaxed, and you know, never had that feeling like everything's okay, always waiting for things to blow up.
And it was about anger.
Yes.
That way. Okay.
Yes. But on the other hand, you know, there was like this uber structure in the house. Like things were expected to be super clean, and we were expected to have the highest grade. So like it was both at the same time.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, and I think that happens a lot, and that's what kind of makes for, well, for one, an interesting life, but for two, like a lot, it can be exhausting.
Give me one of the highlights. Give me one of the memories that you have where like the chaos sort of turned into a thing that you're like, all right, that wasn't too bad. Of course, your chaos wraps around a lot of anger too, so that it may not kind of go that way.
Yeah, no, I've actually removed myself from some of the worst elements of my family. Mm-hmm. So there was never a time where the chaos became okay. Okay. There was a time where I understood that I didn't have to participate.
Oh, okay. So
and that was pretty cool. That's just like, you know, and I'm not angry either. It's not like, well, you know.
Of course, yeah. I
like,
wouldn't be able to do a show.
Fuck you, I'm out of here, da da da. It was more like, you know what? Like, I actually don't need to be a part of this. And I wish you all well, but I'm done.
How old were you when that happened?
The first time I said that was I was 30.
Wow, so deep.
Yeah.
So it took a long time.
Yeah, I was a very like good girl. I did, you know, I tried to do what people wanted me to do my whole life, and it never worked out. You know, yeah, like I always tried to anticipate what was needed and do that or whatever. And you know, other people might have a different opinion, but that's sort of what I was trying to do. And then it just never worked out. Like it was never enough. It never prevented the explosions. It never prevented the.
Did you go through, because this was a lesson that I had to learn how long did it take you to learn that no matter how much you plan, there's always going to be something that pops up that you didn't think about?
I don't know.
You're hoping by next year at some point?
Yeah, maybe. No. I think, yeah, I don't know. I think actually as recently as this last year, this last year has been crazy. I sort of almost on a whim, like from the outside it looks like a whim, mm-hmm. Sold my house, moved to a new neighborhood, left the youth center, you know, which wasn't just a job. It was, people identified me with it. They confused us sometimes. Right. So I walked away from that in a way, and you know, kind of walked into nothing. Mm-hmm. So I think, and I've met some people who are living through very adverse circumstances, and have trusted me with a lot that they might not trust other people with. And so I've kind of been invited into the lives of people who don't have a lot of stability or support. And so that has, like, I never had kids, so I don't know what it's like to just have to drop everything because somebody else needs me or needs something, you know. So that's been my experience with that over the last little while. So I've started to understand that, you know, before I thought, oh, well, I'm gonna be a novelist, I'm gonna write books, I'm gonna be a poet, I'm gonna be a spoken word artist, I'm gonna be a whatever. And I kept thinking I had to focus all my attention and all my time on that. And if that wasn't happening, then, you know, life was unbearable and I was a failure. And now I'm understanding that I really don't have the time to do all those things that I wanted to do. Right. Just because I'm trying to make a living but it's kind of okay. Yeah. Yeah, like those other things seem a little bit frivolous in the face of looking at somebody else who is asking for help or
it's
assistance
funny.
or care.
It might be a little too early to make this connection, but it almost seems to me that with the way you describe the house that you grew up in, having a demand for like this, like a set, like a regimented goal structure where, you know, you set a goal, you go after it, and if you're not achieving that goal, then you're not doing it right. In contrast of like just the chaos of what life actually was, it sounds to me like you kind of took that on as a mantle. Like,
Yeah,
like
maybe I did, yeah.
Yeah, is that something you had thought about in that way at all?
No, actually, I had not made that connection. Thank you. How much do I owe you for all this?
We will discuss my fees afterwards. Mostly, okay, so, all right, so then maybe, because you hadn't thought about it that way, we're not going to get to where I was looking for that way, but tell me about... No, but tell me about, because teaching is a very specific field. It takes a very specific kind of person to say, no, that's what I'm going to do. How did you find your way into that? You said you were with a person who's like, oh, I'm going to just do education, and you just fell into it. But at some point, that had to be a thing that you connected with, or else you would just go away, and it doesn't seem to have.
So it's exciting to like learn stuff,
Right.
especially stuff that helps us make sense of the world, because the world is insane. Like the world is actually insane. The way it's organized, the way it operates doesn't make sense. Like there's nothing about it that makes sense. We're prioritizing profit over everything, which doesn't even match like what it means to be a human being. So we're essentially like forcing ourselves into this way of being, which is so unnatural and so unhealthy and so destructive. And we all know it on some level, but then there's all these messages that come at us that tell us that what we actually know is wrong and we should second guess ourselves all the time. And, you know, so we're constantly being confused. And so learning how all those structures and systems and mechanisms operate to confuse us and kind of fuck us up is so exciting to me.
Okay.
And I get really excited when I can show other people. And that is the only reason I have ever continued to teach. Otherwise, it is like, it's so difficult because most of the learning institutions that exist in this world that I've been a part of are actually intended to indoctrinate people into this terrible way of being. And so you're like, you love demonstrating to people how to like not necessarily, or how to at least be conscious of the way we're being manipulated, but you have to do it in a setting which is a mechanism for manipulation. So it's just like all crazy. It's but funny. It's kind of fun.
But it's
a fun challenge.
It's interesting to me because the way you say it, I'm gonna make an assumption here. If I'm wrong, please correct me. You come at it from a perspective where it's intentional.
The teaching?
No, where the system being there to screw you up.
Yeah.
You come from a perspective where you think it's intentional.
Yes.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty. You know, the advertising industry is like billions and billions and billions of dollars go into that, and the messages that we receive are intentional. You know, and they're controlled by groups of people who would like to, you know, profit in some way. Just the very fact that we are being sort of convinced more and more to carry around these little machines that will continue to send us more and more messages on a regular basis, I think demonstrates that it's very intentional. Like cell phones and the internet, like this is all just a way to ensure that that we depend on technology, but B, also that we are constantly receiving these messages. Also too, it's a form of surveillance, especially things like social media, because we're constantly inputting information about ourselves and our environment and our likes and our dislikes and all of this, and we're doing it for free. Essentially, we're providing free labor to anyone who wanted to know anything about us. Mm-hmm. They don't have to pay anyone to come and find out about us. We do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
But do you look at it like it's part of some systematic goal to accomplish like what?
Population control, I think, is sort of something that's always been a goal of certain people. But I don't know.
I'm just curious because this is one of those conversations that I get into, mm-hmm. Especially in the arts community. There tends to be a lot of at the risk of using a term completely inappropriately, there seems to be a lot of woke motherfuckers walking around like talking about like, oh no, like this is the way it is, with not there being a lot of substantive, like I come from a place where I agree that all of the things that you're saying are happening. I just don't think anybody meant for it to happen. You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily, I think we assume, to me, the idea that there is a group that is sitting aside, twiddling their fingers and twiddling their thumbs going, ha ha, this is how we're going to get them, sort of is just one step away from an imaginary creature floating above you who's really mostly just interested in what you do when you're naked. It seems to me like an extension of religion, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't see it like that, like a group of people sort of, but sort of the mandate of corporations is to generate a profit, mm-hmm. pretty much at any cost, right? Mm-hmm. So, even people, and that's like, so essentially it becomes like illegal for a corporation to act outside of that mandate, which means they cannot, even though there are people working, human beings working within a corporation, they cannot operate as complete human beings, because, so I think in that way, like I don't know how this started. Like I'm not a historian. Mm-hmm. I don't know how this started, but I also know that it's not inevitable that we are participating in the continuation of this and the reproduction of this, and we are participating in it mostly unconsciously, mostly not thinking, hey, maybe there's another way I can be in the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Right?
I 100%.
So I don't know, I don't know enough about it. Probably Noam Chomsky could answer that 100%. Yeah. But what I do know is that it's interfering with our inherent need to be compassionate. It's interfering with the health of human beings, animals, the planet. We're sort of in danger here. There is an environmental crisis happening, so I think that that's where we need to focus on how to achieve some kind of personal liberation, so that we can be more compassionate, so that we can care for one another, so that we can stop being divisive. Like we're constantly creating labels to place on groups so that we can determine who gets most of the stuff in the world and who gets to live comfortably and who doesn't. Like the media is constantly, even this whole thing that's being focused on downtown, the whole situation with the homeless population and addicts and the police, like these are all, like, homeless, addicts, and the police are in the media seems to be like two sides of the same coin, mm-hmm. right? They're both being villainized one way or another. Just depends on who you want to
which side of the
align
coin,
with. Yeah, but it's the same coin. Like mm-hmm. what we're not looking at is the fact that everybody is a human being. You know, we all need food, we all need shelter, and we all need to be cared for in a number of ways. And that's just flat out not happening. Like, we're deciding who gets care and who doesn't. And we're deciding who gets care and who gets sympathy and who gets the benefit of the doubt, and then who gets blamed
Right.
for the things that have happened to them. You know, especially with something like addiction, people have demonstrated that addiction has so much to do with trauma. So essentially what we're doing is we're looking at people who have struggled through terrible trauma sometimes, mostly on their own, who have sought out solutions to it, mostly on their own, and the only things that have been available to them, you know, are sort of from whatever not mainstream means, because that's how resources are distributed unevenly. There are resources available, but not to everybody.
Right.
And so if you don't have resources available to you, and you're suffering, like actually suffering, you need to find them. And you will find them wherever you can, because it's difficult to suffer, you know, and yet we have compassion for some people who are suffering, and we look at other people and we blame them for their suffering, and it doesn't make sense.
When did that part of humanity start being a focus for you?
I think I've always kind of thought this, but I haven't actually always been able to articulate it. I've started several master's degrees and not completed a single one.
Right, good for you.
The farthest I got was...
At least you're not one of them goddamn elitists.
Well, in some ways I may be.
You can't be, you didn't finish.
Yeah, no, I don't finish anything. Okay, Patrick, get this. I don't finish anything.
I'm noting everything down.
Right. It's weird that you're behind the wall listening. What's the question?
When did it become
So,
focused?
okay, so I the same year that we opened the youth center, I started a master's at the university in communications and social justice.
Okay.
And I didn't finish my thesis. I'm halfway done. But I'll tell you, all the knowledge I had access to in that course was like gold. It was the most valuable thing I could have done. And you know, and I had to extend it because of circumstances, and I paid my tuition in like stacks of 20s because I was bartending at Villains, and that was my only means of income. So it was a struggle to get through as far as I did, but worth it. It was fabulous. Yeah.
Talk to me about your experience over at the Windsor Youth Center.
It was...
For people who don't know, and I'm sure
Yeah.
most people watching this, tell them what it is to start with.
So it's still the only drop-in center for homeless youth in Windsor, and we started it. So George Bozanich, who was my husband at the time, and I started it with a small group of people from the United Church, and because there was no drop-in for youth who were experiencing homelessness, and we just thought there should be. Like, it just seemed wrong that there wasn't one, so
Right.
we made one, you know. And actually, kind of right across the street, there was a little storefront for rent for $700 a month, and we just personally signed the lease, actually, which now I know it was kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And we, like, I didn't know anything about anything, but we just thought it had to happen, so we did it. And we applied for a seed grant from the United Church, and we got $20,000.
Okay.
And that was enough to kind of pay rent for a year, and I think we hired one person to help us out for a minimum wage, you know, we got a bunch of volunteers together and cleaned and made food and opened the doors, and nobody showed up.
Really?
Yeah, the first night I was like, oh my God, what have we done? There's no homeless youth in Windsor. And it took a couple of days, and then a couple of young girls came in, and then, you know, before you know it, the place was full every night, and we got to know all the different things that people were struggling with and needed. And we bought a new space further down the street.
Talk to me about some of the things you learned from the people in there. Good, bad, otherwise. What are the things that some of the things that affected you?
Yeah, the things that I learned were that, like, having grown up with, you know, comparably quite a lot of privilege, I was kind of a jerk sometimes, and like had all sorts of preconceived ideas that were like just wrong for me to have. Like, you know, when people would sort of ask for a lot of stuff, what seemed like a lot of stuff, like, can I have a whole bag of cookies instead of just a couple, you know, to take with me, things like that. You know, people asking for things, I guess my mind and my previous understanding of what charity is, people were supposed to just be grateful for whatever they could get.
Right.
You know, and it's just so gross. Like, it's so gross. And it ended up that my happiest moments were the moments where we'd have dinner, we'd serve dinner, and somebody would come in and ask me, like, so what's for dessert? Because as soon as somebody asked me for something that was, you know, not necessarily like a necessity, right, or expressed like, well, I don't like that, is there anything else for dinner? You know, as soon as somebody was able to express themselves by telling me what their likes, their dislikes are, their wants, their desires, then that person is comfortable enough to express themselves as a human being, right?
That's so fucking interesting. I had not even considered that, because you're absolutely
awesome.
Right.
It's awesome. As soon as somebody can walk in and be like, ooh, can I have this? Or I don't like macaroni and cheese, or whatever, then that person no longer feels like a number. They don't feel like a charity case. They feel like an active member of this community who has a right to their own preferences.
Well, that's
like the most exciting thing.
It also changes the focus a little bit, because I think whenever anybody talks about, and it, just even thinking about it, it's so gross. Whenever you talk about homelessness or addicts or whatever, it's always talked about us like it being a selfish thing. What they've done is they've disregarded all the rest of humanity and have decided, I'm going to do that. And it's 100% the exact opposite experience for those people.
Probably, yeah. And furthermore, it also obscures the fact that there's all kinds of rich people who have addictions. Right. There's all kinds of middle class people who are, you know, taking pills or running to the casino every chance they can get, or shopping until they have less than no money. You know, I think there's addiction all over the place. But what do we think of when we say the word addict? Mm-hmm. You know, and so that's different. Also, poverty, you know, privacy is expensive, right? Like, there's a lot of domestic arguments that happen on the street because people can't necessarily afford a place, but there's a lot of like clean, tidy, locked up homes in the suburbs. Conflicts. Oh yeah, but we don't think of that. So that's where these double standards are really, really insidious, and really, really damaging. And the stigma happens. So yeah, so I kind of learned that that if we really are serious about wanting to establish some sort of world that's better, that's healthier, we honestly need to understand that there needs to not that everybody has to have the freedom to express themselves. And as human beings, we have preferences, we have likes, we have dislikes, we have talents, we have desires. And once something interferes with us being able to acknowledge those in a setting, then we have an oppressive situation.
So what's the goal then? So what's the you work in this field that seems like an endless endeavor, coming from a home where the end goal is very, very important. Have you been able to sort of shuffle that aside and take this as a thing that you're just doing, or is there an end goal?
No, because I think the end is pretty clear. Like, we're just gonna die. So that's
Are you planning
very
to save
clear.
the world first? Is kind of what I'm asking.
No, you know what? I was lucky enough to sort of stumble upon a Yoko Ono exhibit way back in Toronto.
Second person on the planet ever to consider themselves lucky to stumble into Yoko Ono.
Well, you know what I learned, and I hadn't.
I'm actually a fan. So.
Are you? Yeah. No, I had not known anything about her artwork at all, and so basically, the whole exhibit was all about art as a process, not a product.
Right.
Wow, this is amazing, you know. And there's especially this one part of the exhibit where there were two circles, white circles, drawn on the floor, and there were a bunch of stones, and under one circle was written the word joy, and under the other circle was written the word sorrow. And it was supposed to be interactive. People were supposed to be moving the stones however they, you know, felt or saw fit or whatever. The only people interacting were children under the age of 10, just playing with these stones, right? And so I don't even remember what I did, but I remember I got in there and I was like, and that had such a profound, like, that is a moment I will always remember. And because that is a creative moment, that is a moment where another artist reached out into the world and said, you know what, here, express yourself. I am giving you like the go ahead, you know? And if we can just do that, no problem.
It's funny because you bring up Yoko Ono of all people, but was art important to you early?
I was a ballet dancer for a very long time until I got just too tall and gangly and busty and all of that. But I went to arts high school.
Okay.
In grade 7 in Toronto. It was called the Toronto High School for Performing Arts. I think there were like 30 people in the whole high school. It was right downtown. There were 2 of us in grade 7 and 3 in grade 8. So they just let us all do grade 8 work. And then I went to grade 9. So when I was in grade 9, I was only 12, which is a couple years younger than everybody else. And then I went to an arts high school in North Carolina, the North Carolina School of Performing Arts, I think. And I was there for 2.5 years.
Mom and dad artists? No?
No, my dad played the guitar.
Okay.
So yeah, and he was a musician when he was younger. My mom is a writer. She's very, very good with language.
Okay.
So I
asked because we didn't get into any specifics, and when you talk about chaos, like chaos and art are like, right?
Yeah.
So, but no, not kind of artsy house.
Not more skilled maybe than.
Okay.
But you know, I guess but yeah, no, my mother is amazing with language, and I remember even before, and I had skipped kindergarten. She made sure I didn't go to kindergarten. I went right into grade 1. But before that, I knew how to read.
No
and
goddamn
write.
snacks for my kid.
No, yeah, I don't even know what kindergarten is about. Like, I just started going to grade 1. Boom, I was 3 years old. You're done. But I remember being at home, and I must have been like younger than that. And she would write a word at the top of the page, like hat, and then I had to write all the words that rhymed with it, you know? So I'm grateful to her for that, for sure.
That's awesome. So then how did art become so important to you early on?
Don't know.
Like, how did art school, like high school, become a thing that you wanted to do?
Well, I loved dancing. Like,
Okay.
I loved it.
All right.
Loved it. And I was good enough, you know, when I was younger to kind of
so you were in there for dance specifically.
I was in there for dance, yes. And then those were amazing experiences because in both situations the schools were fairly new and small and more grassroots. you know, so I guess maybe as a teacher, that's where I absorbed that idea of what a school is, right? From that experience, not from a conventional high school. So like brand new, where you got all these flaky teachers. Like my grade 10 English teacher was amazing. He was a very flamboyantly gay man who would have parties for his students at his home, and he would have like bowls of cigarettes out for everyone, and he made his own clothes, and he
You just said two things that in 2018 automatically get you fired forever.
I know.
Yes.
And you know, he refurbished old dolls and stuff. Like, he was just terribly creative, and the best English teacher I've ever had.
Yeah.
Oh my, like, I know all of my common rules thanks to him,
Right.
which is actually very important when you want to write.
Yeah.
You know, understanding when to use a semicolon. Brilliant. And he drilled that into us. So he's a very, very demanding teacher, but with a purpose. And he was always very clear to us. He said, you guys are artists. You're going to be in front of a camera. He was right. You're going to be in front of a camera one day. And he's like, I want to make sure that you're articulate and you represent yourself properly. So he had an intention behind the demanding sort of, yeah, but he was wonderful. He was wonderful. And then my dad had a kind of important woman in his life who was a sculptor.
Okay.
Yeah, so my parents split up when I was 14, and then he met Berlin, and she was the most beautiful woman. She was 33 years older than him. He was 40, she was 73.
Oh.
And she was just gorgeous and just so full of life. She died when she was 98, and they were together the whole time in one way or another. Yeah, and she was just so wonderful, like such a spirit of anything's possible, you know.
Do you, now that your sort of career is more into the like community services, community active, do you bring art into that? Like, I mean, now I know we're talking about art coming into the gallery here, but do you make art part of your process with the people that you work with at all?
Well, I've only been here for a few weeks.
I mean, even
but
back
already,
in the previous,
Of course.
Yeah.
So the Windsor Youth Center, I believe, became a successful endeavor because it was founded on the principles of, like, well, actually, I don't know if you're familiar with Paulo Freire. He wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, but it's essentially a kind of a methodology or philosophy for achieving personal liberation. Well, I think that's what art is. Okay. So, you know, it sort of goes hand in hand. And in terms of, I don't even think I'm trying to have a career anymore.
Okay.
You know, I kind of don't think I'll ever have a career. However, what I would like to do is to find ways to continue to, like, I don't know, like, serve the people who come in, you know, into my circle and in contact, who come into my world, essentially, as much as possible. And
it's funny because that's basically what George and I have been talking about a lot lately, is the idea that, like, we're at a point where, I didn't ask your age, I don't care necessarily,
47.
but you're, did you say?
47.
47, yeah, so like right in the same range, just kind of at a point in my life, and George had said the same, where it's like, I don't care about any of the rest of it, I just want to create shit and die eventually. Yeah. Like, until then, we're here doing some stuff. What's next?
Yeah. And that's why I moved, and that's why I moved to where I live now, and I just wanna, I don't feel like I'm as concerned about being successful as I used to be, you know. Creating, but also finding ways to, like, connect with people and to help people connect. So I had a young woman had to pick something up here, and I had known her from the youth center, but hadn't had an opportunity to sit down and quietly talk to her. And we talked for over an hour, and she'd never been in this space before, and as she was leaving, she said, "Oh, I really like it here. I'm gonna come back. Thank you so much for the talk." And so I think that if we can listen, but like really listen and consider what people are saying and not try to assume what they mean, but listen to them, listen to the words that they use, then we can have a clue about what people need, and even just sometimes all people need is to be listened to.
I get, excuse me for suddenly taking a weird turn and making this about me, but I get a lot of compliments about, it just happened with George, about how I handle myself in interviews. And I appreciate it very much, but I'm always resistant to the idea when people say that, because the only thing that I think I do, and I've said this a couple times, the only thing that I think I do that's different than some other people in my spot is I actually fucking care about the questions I'm asking. Like, I want to know the answer as opposed to just, okay, and question number 6 is, I think that's all it takes a lot of time. I mean, I'm pontificating now, but...
No, but you're right. Being actually interested in somebody else is awesome. That's where the connection happens.
And I think people are afraid because they think it means that in order to be interested in somebody, because a lot of people do this personally. I know I did for a long time. If you weren't interested in everything there was about me, well, then you just weren't interested in me, so fuck you.
Yes.
Right? And I think people think in order to be interested in somebody else, they have to suddenly dedicate all of their lives into bringing, and you don't. You can take 10 minutes and go, "Hey, what's that thing? All right." Is that something you think about?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the key things that interferes with people being interested in one another is that we don't feel comfortable saying no. So just like you said, we think that it's an all or nothing situation.
Right.
But that's not the case at all. We can be interested, we can even offer assistance, but we can also say no when it's not comfortable or not possible. But people have a really hard time saying no. But I had to learn that when I was at the youth center, because we didn't have unlimited resources. So sometimes I had to say no to people.
Right.
But I feel no should only be part of a conversation. So you can't even have a conversation if you're not already interested in somebody, right? So if I know somebody and they ask me for something or to do something or whatever, and I can't or don't want to or whatever the reason, if I look at them and I say, "You want to know it? No, like not right now at this point," or not whatever, and I give it a reason, well, we're still having a conversation. Right. There's no doors that have been shut. Yeah. Right? And so I think that that's really important. So I think we've lost the ability to actually have those conversations with people where we take the risk of also, expressing what we can and cannot do or will not do. Because it's scary to say no. We don't know what the other person's going to do, or we're going to feel guilty, or whatever.
I'm going to give it okay. I'm immediately drawn, just because of the circumstances that people will find themselves in that you work with. Having that connectability, like that ability to connect with people, requires like a personal commitment to sort of like opening up and allowing some risk with people. And I think the people that you tended, like with Windsor Youth Center mostly, would have dealt with in those circumstances are the people who are most adverse to opening themselves up to more risk. Does that make any sense? Talk to me about that experience in dealing with people, in trying to get people to connect who are people that naturally want to shut down.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I think in my experience, I wouldn't recommend people to connect unless they actually truly felt like it was okay for them to do so, because there's not a lot of people who won't treat you like shit. Okay. And especially when you don't fit, someone doesn't fit what's acceptable in society, you know, whether it's the way we look or the choices that we make, or the fact that, you know, we've got an addiction, or we're homeless, or, you know, you name it, right? We're gay, or we're trans. Like, there's all sorts of reasons why people may not be acceptable.
And if you haven't found one, give it a couple of
right.
minutes. Yeah.
But so that can be really dangerous, you know. And I've come to understand that. And then when you don't fit, the world will do its best to make you feel ashamed of that, even if it is no fault of your own.
Right.
And I think what I've come to understand is loneliness and shame are two of the most destructive. Loneliness is one of the most dangerous places to be. That's one of the most dangerous states of being, because loneliness can be unbearable, and people will find somebody to alleviate that, right? Or a situation to alleviate that. And I think we have to treat that seriously. It is unbearable at times for some people, you know. We're social beings. And then shame is so destructive because it's closely attached, right? When we're ashamed of something, then we're hiding. We're constantly hiding. We're constantly afraid of being found out or being judged or whatever. So it just feeds that loneliness. And those are the two most dangerous things. So
it's so fun. I'm going to ask you about a topic you may not have any knowledge base in whatsoever. It's been part of, actually, the reason it's in my head is because for some reason Jordan Peterson popped into my head as you were talking. And I know you come from a background that has social justice involvement, and Jordan Peterson specifically is a very volatile figure in that world. But also the group of people he's been recently associated with, and I don't dive deep into this, so I don't know a lot about it. But there's this group of guys essentially that go, I think they were connected to the shooting or whatever, right? The idea that there's these guys that are forced monogamy or whatever they're calling.
Okay.
They're basically, they're forced celibate. Like, they're basically dudes who can't get laid, right?
okay.
And the reason I ask is because with your social background, I thought you might have some idea of this, but I almost wonder, because that's like the extreme end of what you're talking about, right? Like that's the guys who have literally sat in their basements alone and have found no other way to connect with human beings, so they go into this sort of how with the understanding that loneliness and that disconnectivity is so detrimental, how would you even consider, and again, this is a topic you may
guys
have
who don't have sex?
Yeah, but those that it's not just guys that don't have sex, it's guys
choosing?
that they have it's that they look at the world like women have chosen not to sleep with them because of circumstances outside of their own. And that loneliness has driven them to some pretty wacky fucking ideas, one of which is running through the street shooting people up.
Yeah.
And it's that result of and I hope it doesn't come off like this, because I'm certainly not. I'm not defending that idea. I'm wondering, coming from a place where you know just how detrimental that loneliness can be, if it gets to a point where a person is trying to alleviate that in such a reckless way, coming from the world of it's your job to deal with these people, how do you wrap your head around that? How do you wrap your head around people who have taken the worst circumstances in their life and kind of went with it?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know anyone who's shot anyone.
Sure, yeah.
So that's extreme, and that's, that sort of violence is definitely directed outward. I think a lot of the people that I know and love, their destructiveness is directed maybe, or ends up being internal. Yeah, and directed toward themselves. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a background in psychology, but I don't even know if that's necessary. I think it's sort of just common sense that, that people, when they're lonely, are going to seek some sort. I mean, it all comes down to suffering, and when people are suffering, we tend to find ways to alleviate that, right? And I'm sure there's millions of different ways that people will find to alleviate that. One of the problems, I think, is, so I spoke at a roundtable thingy, and I was talking about mental health, things that are, forms of suffering that aren't necessarily visible or obvious. That's when things get really unfortunate. So if someone shows up at the emergency room and they've got a broken leg, no one's going to make them walk 5 stories to go to x-ray.
Right.
Like, that doesn't make sense, right? Of course you wouldn't do that. That's common sense.
Right.
We'd get you a wheelchair or whatever, or x-ray is right down that, like whatever. We accommodate that as best as we can so that the person can be treated and heal. Someone exhibits some sort of symptom of mental illness or addiction, or I don't know if you want to combine the two, and now all of a sudden, what do they have to do? They have to do all the things that they might not be capable of to get the help that they need. Make it to an appointment 3, 4, 5 weeks down the line. Right. Somewhere that they might not even know where that is. They might not have access to transportation. They might not be able to keep track of the day or the time of day. Right. They might not have the money to get there. So there are all these barriers. They might not have their health card. Like, there are all these barriers that we actually are like not removing for people to get the help that they need to be healed, just like someone with a physical ailment. So we're preventing people from healing, and then when they don't heal, we blame them for it. Right. The whole thing's stupid. Like, what should happen is someone expresses a need for some sort of care, and we should accommodate that the way we accommodate someone with a broken leg and a wheelchair. But we don't. And then not only do we not, we blame that person. It doesn't make sense, and then that's not the end of the story, because that person's still a human being living their lives and suffering. So, and we let this happen. We just let it happen. And we maybe have debates about it, in the newspaper, on social media, or city council, or whatever. At the end of the day, those people are still suffering.
Do you not think that, to some extent, though, no matter what system you put in place, there are going to be the people that find their way through the cracks? Because at the end of the day, any system that we create is created by human beings, and we're imperfect to begin with.
Yeah, but I think care.
It's not to say we can't do better, but.
Yeah, and I think that this doesn't require perfection. It requires a prioritizing, a shift in a prioritizing. We need to just care about one another more.
It's interesting because I've had a lot of conversations specifically about addiction and mental illness lately, not necessarily on the podcast, but that too. And I keep going back to, because I'm old enough, and I believe you are old enough, to not remember the facilities themselves, but at least remember the stories of, like, sanitariums, like crazy, scary fucking places where you had nothing, you didn't know how to handle anything, so people just sent their kids off to these places to basically die in a hole. And I think a lot of what we see when it comes to, like, homelessness and addiction and mental illness is sort of like what's left over from them not knowing how to fix those facilities when they realized what a problem they were.
Well, I think it's also important to remember that there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of all of this, right? Like the whole opioid crisis. It's making big pharma tons of cash. And then not only that, now they're putting out drugs to sort of help people come off of the opiates, and they're making money off of that too. So I think that it's important to recognize that there's a lot of profit to be made by an imperfect system. There's a lot of profit to be made off of illness, mental illness and addiction especially. And as long as people are profiting, there's not a whole lot of motivation to change the system.
It's funny. I've got like a sideways agreement to you, because I think there is a lot of money in making people think they're mentally ill. I don't think there's a lot of money in mental illness. Does that make any sense?
How so?
I think like when people talk about big pharma, and it's a term I'm not a big fan of to begin with, because I think it really just grossly exaggerates some stuff. But when people think about big pharma and they talk about what happens there, I don't think, or at least for me personally, I've never considered it as, well, they can make a lot of money by providing a drug that helps with a specific mental illness. They can make a lot of money by convincing a bunch of people that don't really have mental illnesses that they're fucked up, so they need their product. And I think that's a different thing.
Well, I think that the way the world is right now, in terms of not many people having access to healthy food, or the food that used to be healthy, the lifestyles that we live are not healthy. Mm-hmm. You know, the air is not good, the water is not good, animals are dying. I think it's hard to eat, and so many people, because they don't feel well or they're not well, are already, you know, even from a young age, dependent on some sort of medication or drug, whether it's prescribed or from the street. So I think it's even hard to separate that, to determine.
Gotcha.
I think we just have like we just live in a really destructive world where people are dependent on substances, whether they're legal or illegal. People are dependent on substances right now, and I'm even including sugar in that. Like, you know, the things that people consume, and that has to do with us being a consumer society, right? Our value is recognized pretty much solely based on our ability to be good consumers. The more money we have, the more valuable we are to the world, because we can buy stuff, right? So that sort of consumption has to be that consumption is valued. That has to be reinforced in every aspect of our lives in order for it to sustain itself, because it's not natural. We don't naturally just consume all the time. Like, it doesn't make sense. That's why there's advertising, because people on their own would just stop buying stuff that they didn't need. But we need advertising that convince us to just keep buying. It doesn't matter what it is. Just keep consuming, you know? And so I think that's become insidious, and we're just constantly consuming. Like, people are constantly carrying around bottles of water. Why? Like, no one here is in danger of dying of thirst. What? Like, stop and have a drink of water. Like,
if you don't buy a bottle of water, Nestle might not survive, and you can't get a Coke.
Exactly. And even the reusable bottles, right? I want to know how many of those are lying around in landfill now too. Like, we're not saving the world by producing more and more cuter, stylish, you know, reusable bottles that I can't keep track of one to save my life. So if I had one, I'd probably end up buying one a month, you know? So there's another 12 things. Whereas if we all just, like when I was a kid, you go somewhere and they have cups and a tap, you drink some water, then you go on your way, and then when you need another drink, you get a cup and some water. Like, why are we carrying around stuff? Like, we're afraid to not consume for more than 15 minutes. Like, oh my God, what if I don't?
You gotta stay hydrated, man. You gotta be hydrated.
Well, I took when I was in Korea for a number of years, and I took a yoga teacher training course from this crazy, and when I say crazy, I mean awesome, Dutch guy. And everyone, you know, at the beginning is bringing their bottles of water. And he's like, what are you afraid of? Why are you? He's like, first of all, you don't need that much water. It kind of messes with the balance of your energies and everything. And he's like, you don't need to be stopping every 5 minutes to drink water. We're focusing here. Like, we're working on energy, people, and you're all focusing on your material existence. And I think that's a huge problem. I think that's where we kind of go wrong. Like, if we were more concerned with what's going to survive after this world, we would make much different decisions. But we're all concerned about, like, our body, like, our, you know, and the immediate things that we sense, but we're not at all concerned with what's going on, you know, inside and what sustains us essentially. But
well, I'll tell you what, we have covered a number of topics
yes, we
here.
have.
It has been fantastic getting to know you, Tamara. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And make sure you guys hang out down at this lovely space February 1st if you're seeing this before that. George and I will be here playing a couple of
Yes.
songs. I know Ryan, the fabulous Ryan Thompson, will be around as well.
Yeah.
All kinds of art, all kinds of
Yep.
fun. Come out, have I don't know if there's drinks, but if there aren't, bring your own, whatever. And
It
we'll
will
have
be
a
fun.
blast. We'll have a
be
good
fun.
time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
My pleasure.
Make sure you guys click the subscribe buttons and the notification bells, and check out the links for here and all the sponsors, so that you can go buy their stupid products, because we all have to buy stuff to live in this stupid world we're in. Thanks for hanging out with us on this podcast. Thanks, Tamara.
Thank you.
It's Tamara, isn't it?
It is.
Fuck.
That's okay.
That was awesome.
All right. Was it? Am I fired?